Back at it today with another video, as in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at every MLB team's most loved player. As for the picks, I pretty much base them off of what the general baseball community thinks of them. And there are going to be a few instances in which the most loved player is also the team's best player, but just want to make it clear I'm not looking at the best player. I know in some cases that can be true, but in this video I'm just looking at the most loved player regardless of how good they are. So with that in mind, let's get right into this. Getting things started off with the Arizona Diamondbacks, I'm going with Zach Gallen. Gallen is a pretty down-to-earth guy who really doesn't seem to make too much headlines other than when he's pitching really good. He's not the most exciting player in the world by any means, but how can you not like Zach Gallen? He's a really likable guy and a really good pitcher as well. Next up, we have the Atlanta Braves, where I'm going with Michael Harris. Harris this past season came up as a rookie and dominated. Harris is similar to Gallen in the sense that he's a pretty quiet, down-to-earth type of guy, but he's also a really good player, and I think he's the most likable Atlanta Brave. Moving on to the Baltimore Orioles, I'm going with Adley Rutschman. Rutschman came up this past season as the top prospect in baseball, and he lived up to the hype. And he really carried the Orioles out of mediocrity. He was easily their best player as a rookie, and how can you not like a guy like Adley Rutschman? He came up and, like I said, dominated and carried the Orioles as a rookie. Moving on to the Red Sox, I have Xander Bogaerts. Yes, I know he is technically a free agent and not on the Red Sox right now, but I really couldn't think of anyone else with this one. I'm not saying the Red Sox are a bunch of guys that you hate, but no one really stood out to me as likable other than Bogaerts. He's a really good player, and like many other players on this list, he's pretty quiet and not the most flashy player in the world, so you really can't hate him. Getting on to the Chicago White Sox, I'm going with Liam Hendriks. Hendriks is a lot different than the players we've mentioned up to this point because he is loud and he's electric out there on the mound. But as loud and crazy as he is out there on the mound, I really like his passion, and I think a lot of people think the same as well, and he's also one of the few Australian players in the league today. Getting on to the Cubs, I have Seiya Suzuki. Suzuki took a pretty long time to choose a major league team this past offseason, and while awaiting his signing, he posted some pretty funny reactionary pictures on Twitter. And ever since then, I've sort of liked him, and I think a lot of people think the same as well. He has a great personality, and he's a really likable player. Getting on to the Cincinnati Reds, I'm going with Joey Votto. I think a lot of you are going to agree with me on this one. Votto is one of the most likable players in baseball. Every now and then you're going to find someone who despises Joey Votto, but that happens with pretty much any person on this earth, so all in all, I think he's one of the most likable players in baseball and is definitely the most likable Red. Getting on to the Guardians, I'm going with Stephen Kwan. Kwan came up as a rookie this past season, and he took the league by storm. He finished out the year as one of the best rookies in all of baseball, and he's a really likable guy, and I think he has a great personality and is the most likable Guardian. Moving on to the Colorado Rockies, I'm going with Charlie Blackmon. What is there not to like about Charlie Blackmon? He's got the mullet, the beard, he's got the great personality to go along with it. This guy is probably one of the most likable players in the game today. Next up, I have the Detroit Tigers, where I'm going with Miguel Cabrera. This one's a no-brainer. Cabrera, on top of being a first-ballot Hall of Famer, has a great personality. Over the years, he's always sort of messed around with players at first base. He's always joking around, having a fun time out there on the field, and that's a player that's really likable in my opinion. Next up, I have the Houston Astros, where I'm going with Jeremy Pena. Pena came up this past season and was one of the best rookies in baseball. He's obviously a really good baseball player, but on top of that, he's really likable. He's a down-to-earth type of guy. He's not gonna cause any issues in the clubhouse or anything like that, and for that reason, I think he's the most likable Astro. Moving on to the Kansas City Royals, I'm going with Salvador Perez. Perez, even in his younger days, has always been a really likable player. He sort of reminds me of Miguel Cabrera in the sense that he always seems to joke around and have fun on the baseball field, and for that reason, I think a lot of people around baseball really like him. Moving on to the Angels, I'm going with Shohei Ohtani. Shohei Ohtani is the face of baseball today, and obviously a big reason in that is because he's really good at baseball, but also because he's very likable. In 2021, I went to the Home Run Derby myself at Coors Field and saw Ohtani, and he by far got the most ovation out of the crowd out of any player. Next up is the LA Dodgers, where I'm going with Mookie Betts. Betts has always been a player that's played the game with a lot of fire and passion. He reminds me of Liam Hendriks in the sense that he shows a lot of emotion out there on the baseball field, and when he makes a big play, he's gonna show it. Moving on to the Marlins, I'm going with Sandy Alcantara. Alcantara, like many other players on this list, is pretty quiet and down to earth. But after this past season, as we all know, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball, and that's sort of gotten his name out there, and I think a lot of people really like him and the way he plays the game. Getting onto the Milwaukee Brewers, I'm going with Christian Yelich. I know this may be a little bit of a hot take here because Yelich has been pretty bad over the past couple seasons, but I still think a lot of people love him. He plays the game hard, he's a pretty good guy, at least that's what it seems like from afar, and I think he's the most likable Brewer. Next up is the Minnesota Twins, where I'm going with Byron Buxton. Buxton is again another player that plays with a lot of emotion. When he makes a big play, he's going to show his emotions, and I really like players like that. And I think a lot of you are going to agree with me on that. He has fought through many injuries throughout his career, and he's fought through, and to this day, he's one of the best defensive center fielders in the game. Moving on to the New York Yankees, I'm going with Nestor Cortes. What is there not to like about this guy? He's a really good baseball player, and he also has an amazing stash. Cortes is one of the few Yankees that I don't mind, and you could argue Aaron Judge is the most likable Yankee, but a lot of people seem to hate Judge, and I just can't say that about Cortes. Moving on to the New York Mets, I'm going with Daniel Vogelbach. Vogelbach is easily one of the most liked players in the game today. He's obviously a huge dude, and when he hits a gapper, all eyes are on him to see him run the bases. It's just an awesome thing to watch. It's really funny, and I think Vogelbach is definitely the most likable Met. Getting on to the Oakland A's, I'm going with Tony Kemp. The Athletics are a team that really doesn't have too many big names, but I think Kemp is definitely a likable guy. He plays the game really hard, and I think there's really nothing you can dislike about him. Getting on to the Philadelphia Phillies, I'm going with Alec Bohm. Early on in the regular season, when Bohm said, "I effing hate this place," and the media kinda caught on to it, most players would lie and say they didn't say that, but Bohm was fully honest, and ever since then I think he's gained the respect of a lot of people, including myself. I was close to putting Kyle Schwarber on this list. A lot of people love him, but I think Bohm deserves a lot of respect, and I think he's the most liked Philly. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Pirates, I'm going with O'Neal Cruz. Cruz is obviously a physical specimen over at shortstop. He is a robot. And he's also a really personable guy. He's a really likable player, and everyone I've seen around baseball has seemed to really like him, so I definitely think he's the most noticeable and likable Pirate. Getting on to the San Diego Padres, I'm going with Juan Soto. This is a tough one because I know there are some people out there who really hate Soto, but I think the majority of baseball fans like him. Not only is he one of the best players in the game today, but he also plays the game the right way. He has a lot of heart. He plays very hard whenever he's out there on the field, and for that reason, I think he's the most liked Padre. Moving on to the San Francisco Giants, I'm going with Brandon Crawford. Crawford is a very noticeable face. He's been around the league for a long time, and throughout his career with the playoff experience he has and the solid play he's displayed, I think he's respected by his peers and a lot of baseball fans around the league. Next up, we have the Seattle Mariners, where I'm going with Julio Rodriguez. This one was pretty easy. Rodriguez is an up-and-coming star. He is the face of a very young and good Seattle Mariners team. He has a great personality. He could be the face of baseball one day, and I definitely think he's the most likable Mariner. Getting on to the St. Louis Cardinals, I'm going with Adam Wainwright. Wainwright throughout his career has always been a very likable guy. He plays the game the right way at a very high level, and I think a lot of people have really recognized him and started to like him throughout his career, especially over the past couple seasons. Moving on to the Tampa Bay Rays, I have Tyler Glasnow. Glasnow is one of the most recognizable players today because of his flow, and he's also really likable. I find myself on Twitter a lot of the times with people simply praising Tyler Glasnow and how he's one of the best players in the game today, so I guess you could say people might overrate him, but he is a really good pitcher, and a lot of people do like him. Moving on to the Texas Rangers, I have Jacob deGrom. I get it, Jacob deGrom is loved by a lot of people right now for not going to their division. Alright, but in all seriousness, deGrom has been a very personable guy throughout his career. He plays the game the right way at a really, really high level, and I think he's the most likable Ranger. Moving on to the Blue Jays, I'm going with George Springer. Although Springer was a part of the Astros cheating scandal in 2017, he's really revived his reputation, and even being on the Astros, he was always a really good guy. He plays the game at 110%. He puts all his effort, especially defensively, out there in center field, so I think he gains a lot of respect for that, and he's one of the most respected players around the league. And finally, getting onto the Washington Nationals, I have Luke Voit. Voit is one of the few recognizable faces on the Nationals today, and a lot of people seem to like him. At the same time, a lot of people feel bad for him because they want him out of Washington because they're clearly rebuilding, and Voit probably wants to win now just like any other player in their prime, but he's a very likable player and definitely the most likable National. Alright, so that's going to wrap today's video up. Let me know what you guys think down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.